natin ang diwang ito. Sa ngayon, nagdududa't nangangamba tayo kung makakabalik pa sa dati nating buhay. Pero aangat tayong muli. Hindi pa pagapi sa COVID ang ating tatag at determinasyon. Hindi pa dadaig sa bagyo, lindol, baha, at pagsabog ng bulkan ang ating lahi. Babangon at babangon. Kaya aangat tayong muli. Kakayanin natin ito. Lahat tayo may maiaambag. Sa palagi ang pagsuot ng face mask at face shield, sa paghuhugas ng kamay at pagpapanatili ng distansya, hindi lang sarili natin ang mailigtas, kundi pati na rin ang mga taong nasa ating paligid. Wala mang katiyakan ang mga darating na araw, pero kapag naisapuso natin ang pag-iingat, aangat tayong muli. Isang araw, magkakasama nating sasalubungin ang bagong umaga. Sa ating pag-iingat, aangat tayong lahat.
We will now begin PHINMA Corporation's Annual Stockholders Meeting. May we request everyone to stand for the Philippine National Anthem. Let us all welcome Mr. Oscar J. Hilado, PHINMA Corporation's Chairman of the Board. Mr. Hilado, the virtual floor is yours.
The annual meeting of stockholders will please come to order. Because of the current pandemic, and even while Metro Manila is now under a modified enhanced community quarantine, which allows a limited movement of people, our corporation has decided to proceed with the conduct of this meeting remotely or via live streaming to avoid any health and safety risk on the part of any of our stockholders. This is the second stockholders meeting of its kind to be conducted by your corporation in accordance with the rules of the Securities and Exchange Commission. Let me first introduce the members of the Board of Directors who are joining us in today's meetings. Mr. Ramon R. Rosario Jr., Dr. Magdaleno B. Albarracin Jr., Mr. Ambassador Jose L. Puisia Jr., Mr. Roberto M. Lavinia, Mr. Victor J. Del Rosario, Attorney Troy A. Luna, who is also our Corporate Secretary. And our independent directors, Mr. Guillermo D. Luchanco, Mr. Juan B. Santos, Attorney Lilia B. De Lima, Ms. Rizalina G. Mantaring. We also acknowledge the presence of all the officers of PHINMA Corporation. Mr. Antonio Lavinia of Stock Transfer, Inc., and our auditors, SGV and Company, represented by Mr. Wilson Tan, Ms. Vivian Ruiz, Mr. Martin Guantes, Ms. Meredith Miguel, Ms. Belinda Bengway, and Mr. Aaron Escartin. May we know from the corporate secretary whether notices of this annual meeting were sent to all stockholders?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, the notice with the agenda of this meeting was posted on the website of the corporation, was published in the Philippine Daily Inquirer and the Philippine Star for 2 consecutive days on March 19 and 20, 2021, and was disclosed to the Securities and Exchange Commission and the Philippine Stock Exchange in accordance with the rules of the SEC.
Mr. Secretary, could you please inform our stockholders of the procedures for attendance, voting on each item of our agenda, and participation in today's meetings?
Mr. Chairman, as stated in the notice of this meeting, stockholders may participate and attend this meeting only by remote communication. Stockholders who have informed the company of the attendance through a dedicated email provided by the company in the said notice on or before April 8, 2021 shall be considered present at this meeting. The following rules of conduct and procedure, which are contained in the explanation on each item of the agenda posted on the website of the corporation and earlier disclosed, apply to this meeting. 1. Stockholders may cast their votes through a form named ballot/proxy sent together with the information statement, which stockholders may submit on or before April 8, 2021 to the same dedicated email address. 2. All the items in the agenda for approval by the stockholders may be approved only by the affirmative vote of the stockholders owning at least majority of the outstanding capital stock present or represented at the meeting, provided that there is a quorum, except the amendment of bylaws and election of directors. The amendment of bylaws require the approval of stockholders present or represented at the meeting constituting at least 2/3 of the total issued and outstanding capital stock of the company. On the other hand, the election of directors would be based on the number of votes cast by the stockholders present or represented at this meeting for each or more nominees for election as directors as described in the information statement. 3. The votes received have been tabulated by the company's independent stock transfer agent, the Stock Transfer Service, Inc. 4. Each proposed resolution for approval by the stockholders will be shown on the screen, and the number of affirmative votes received for the approval of such resolution shall be reported by the corporate secretary. The votes received by each nominee for election as director will also be reported by the corporate secretary. And 5, questions from stockholders have been received through the same dedicated email address. This will be answered during this meeting subject to appropriateness, relevancy, and time limits. And lastly, stockholders may also send questions or comments within 1 week after this meeting. Those are the rules and procedure for attendance and participation at this meeting, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Secretary, do we have a quorum for this meeting?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Based on the tabulation of attendance, there are present or duly represented at this meeting stockholders owning more than 78.7% of the issued and outstanding capital stock of the corporation, or 214,234,753 shares. There is therefore a quorum for purposes of this meeting, Mr. Chairman.
Legal notices having been given and a quorum being present, we are now ready to proceed with the meeting. The next item on the agenda is the reading and approval of the minutes of the previous meeting of the stockholders held on June 24, 2020. May I request the secretary to discuss the resolution for approval with the stockholders and the votes received thereon?
Mr. Chairman, copies of the minutes were distributed to the stockholders as Annex D of the information statement. The proposed resolution to dispense with the reading of the minutes and for the approval thereof is now shown on the screen. Based on the tabulation of votes, stockholders owning a total of 214,234,753 shares, or 100% of shares present or represented at this meeting, voted in favor of the proposed resolution.
Having received the affirmative votes of stockholders owning at least majority of the shares present at this meeting, the resolution is approved. The next item on the agenda is the approval of the annual report of management for the year ended 31 December 2020. We shall now hear from our Senior Vice President and Chief Financial Officer, Ms. Regina Alvarez, and then our President and Chief Executive Officer, Mr. Ramon Rosario Jr.
Fellow shareholders, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. I'm pleased to present to you a brief recap of the audited financial statements of PHINMA Corporation for the year 2020. Consolidated revenue of your company amounted to 12.3 billion, an increase of 8% over the previous year due to increased revenues from our construction materials group, aided by higher market acceptance of our legacy brand, Union Cement. This offset a decline in revenue from the education group as a result of the late start of classes in August 2020. Consolidated costs and expenses increased 7% to 10.9 billion in support of expanded sales during the year. Income from operations likewise increased to 1.3 billion from 1.1 billion the previous year. On the other hand, equity net earnings of affiliates decreased from 44 million in 2019 to 2 million in 2020, largely due to equitized loss of affiliate Coral Way City Hotels Corporation. Consolidated EBITDA increased to 1.7 billion from 1.4 billion the previous year. Net income attributable to equity holders of the parent decreased to 173 million in 2020. A share in income from the construction materials group was offset largely by foreign exchange loss and operating expenses of the parent company, and a decrease in income contribution from the education group. All told, consolidated net income in 2020 amounted to 522 million, an increase from 437 million in 2019. Allow me now to move on to PHINMA Corporation's statement of financial position. Total assets of your company as of year-end 2020 amounted to 24.5 billion. Of these, approximately 10.3 billion are current assets, 2.9 billion of which are cash and short-term investments. Total liabilities, on the other hand, amounted to 15.9 billion. PHINMA Corporation continues to have a strong balance sheet with current ratio of 1.53:1 and debt-to-equity ratio at 1.86:1. Book value as of December 31, 2020 is 24.16 per share. Finally, we are pleased to report that your board has maintained the cash dividend at the current level of 40 centavos per share. This will be payable to shareholders on May 5, 2021. Those are the financial highlights for the year 2020. Our President and Chief Executive Officer, Mr. Ramon R. Rosario Jr., will provide more detail on the performance of the business units in 2020 and our outlook for this year. Thank you.
My fellow shareholders, a pleasant good afternoon to everyone. We at PHINMA are more committed than ever to our mission of making lives better. We accomplish our mission through the businesses that we are in, providing goods and services that are essential to our nation's development. For our 65-year history, our focus has been on nation building and making lives better, as exemplified in our investments that allow us to provide accessible quality education, comfortable and secure homes, safe and durable infrastructure, as well as safe lodging for travelers. This same focus anchors us and will enable PHINMA to continue growing this year and in future years as we demonstrate that good business can serve the interests of our shareholders while also making a strong social impact. We take a long-term strategic view in managing our businesses so that we can indeed do good by doing well. This is the heart of PHINMA. While the COVID-19 pandemic has caused unprecedented damage on our country, causing the deaths of thousands of Filipinos, leaving millions unemployed and delaying our robust economic growth, FINMA has consciously exerted efforts to sustain the economy, protect our citizens, and support the communities where we operate. Through the FINMA National Scholarship Program, we have supported the education of 224 college graduates in the fields of education, engineering, and accounting in the University of the Philippines, Philippine Normal University, and the Polytechnic University of the Philippines. Our graduates, 97% of whom are in the Philippines, are now giving back to their own communities. Of note, 77 of our scholars graduated with academic honors, and we have had 5 top-notchers. We are continuing to expand the FINMA National Scholarship Program, expanding to the schools of FINMA education as of last year. Please allow me to discuss the operating results of our strategic business units. FINMA Education Holdings is a growing network of tertiary institutions that make lives better by providing education to underserved students. By intended design, we cater to youth who otherwise would not be able to attend college. Often they are first-generation students with unique needs that we address through various programs and interventions. Our track record in flexibility and adaptability, as well as our focus on the mission, made a difference this past year as the COVID-19 pandemic brought unprecedented challenges. Our low-income students, who make up the majority of the population, were left without gadgets and stable internet connectivity. To continue to offer quality education, we piloted 2 remote learning models, Flex and Remote and Distance, or RAD learning, each responding to different sectors of our market and combining physical coursework with low bandwidth online interaction. We ensured that both students and teachers were equipped with the tools they needed through strategic partnerships that made gadget plans and monthly data allowances available. We continue to offer scholarships on top of our already accessible fees to enable students to continue and complete their studies despite the economic challenges faced by their families. Anecdotally, students appreciated not just the financial help, but also the ways in which Flex and RAD learning made them feel part of a bigger community, even while isolated in their homes. Despite losses in enrollment seen by our competitors, we, for our part, welcomed 71,659 students in the first semester. In 2020, the company achieved revenues of 2.6 billion pesos, with a decrease from last year, which is attributed largely to the absence of summer classes, as well as the shift in the academic calendar from June to late August, which delayed the recognition of some revenues to the following year. This resulted in a consolidated net loss of 168 million pesos for 2020, though FINMA Education is highly optimistic that profitability will return in calendar year 2021. To serve more Filipino students, we acquired FINMA Rizal College of Laguna, our 8th school in the Philippines and the first in a planned Laguna network. On the international front, FINMA Education now manages STIMIC and STIKES Charisma in East Java, Indonesia. Our graduates continue to perform well despite the pandemic and the suspension of many of the board accreditation exams. Significantly, 3 Southwestern University FINMA School of Medicine graduates topped the 2020 physician licensure exams, a very welcome achievement, especially when our nation needs skilled, ethical physicians more than ever. Overall, FINMA Education has fielded 101 board exam top-notchers since 2004. We now have over 55,000 FINMA Education graduates, since we first entered the education sector. We are also very proud to share the news that around 81% of graduates get their first job within 1 year from graduation. We expect the employability of our graduates will continue to improve in the coming years. Finma Education continues initiatives to grow its network organically as well as through strategic acquisitions. Proceeds of investments made by Kaizen Private Equity, the Netherlands Development Finance Company or FMO, and Asian Development Bank will be used to further develop the network, improve existing schools, and acquire another school in Indonesia, where our target is quite ambitious to grow enrollees to 150,000 within the next 10 to 12 years. 2020 was a period of change for the entire education industry. By re-examining strategies and adapting to the changing needs of students, employees, and communities, it was clear that our mission became even more important. Finma Education will continue to adapt with new ways to make sure the youth are ready to face a changed and still changing world. Moving into our construction materials group, Finma's CMG is composed of Union Galva Steel Corporation, Phil Cement Corporation, and Finma's Solar Energy Corporation. Our vision is for our construction materials group to provide high quality, safe, durable, and reliable supply of construction materials to literally build our nation. Our construction materials group was able to achieve strong record growth in 2020, with the three companies generating combined revenues of almost 10 billion pesos and combined net income of 916 million pesos in 2020. Despite the decline in the construction industry during the pandemic, the industry, we believe, is poised for a recovery over the next few years. And we view the construction sector as one of the key drivers of our country's growth and economic recovery. We are confident that Finma's Construction Materials Group is well positioned and will contribute strongly towards developing our nation. Despite the early weakness in flat steel demand, Union Galva Steel Corporation managed to deliver strong operational performance and post a significant recovery by year-end as the company enhanced customer engagement initiatives and operational efficiencies in production and logistics. The company will continue to expand the business further in a way that meets the changing needs of our country, and we see strong potential moving forward. Phil Cement, for its part, posted significant gains in 2020, backed by the efficient operation of our new Mariveles cement facility, which was launched in January. The company also leveraged on strong customer partnerships and increased reliability and availability of our legacy Union Cement brand in key areas. Union Cement is now favored by many large institutional bulk cement users, proof of its consistently high quality and strength. With Union Cement being used in many markets and construction projects, Phil Cement has delivered on its commitment to provide high quality cement to Filipinos nationwide. The pandemic has brought home the need to maintain vigilance in operations, avoid complacency, and prioritize each other's safety and well-being. With conviction and new strategies in place from the lessons we have learned in 2020, our Construction Materials Group continues to move forward with renewed hope and an unwavering commitment to our mission of making lives better in our country. Moving now to properties. Finma Property Holdings Corporation, a 35% owned affiliate of the company, recognizes the potential to expand into growing urban centers in the Philippines. Finma Properties makes lives better by providing safe, comfortable shelter to Filipino families. Our company develops affordable medium-rise condominium units now in Metro Manila, Davao City, Cebu City, and San Jose, Batangas, and we aspire to seize market share in these rising areas. Since inception, we have helped provide homes to more than 20,000 Filipino families. Finma Properties adopted to new ways of doing business by focusing efforts on the safety and well-being of our residential communities and our companies. The company accelerated shifts to digital marketing and transactions to enable safe and more efficient operations to address the needs of our customers. Moreover, Finma Properties worked actively with regulators and industry stakeholders to help formulate new policies to revive the Philippine housing industry in the wake of the pandemic. Finma Properties posted revenues of 2 billion pesos in 2020, at par with the previous year. Consolidated net income for the year amounted to 69.3 million pesos, and total assets of the company increased to 5.9 billion pesos in 2020 from 5.1 billion pesos the previous year. As it enters 2021, Finma Properties remains on a path towards growth and increased profitability, building on foundations laid in previous years towards its vision of a bigger and bolder property company. Finma Properties continues to adhere to its vision of creating more Filipino value for money homes and living solutions to make lives better for generations of Filipinos to come. PHINMA Corporation, through Asian Plaza Inc., a subsidiary, has a 36% equity interest in Finma Hospitality, as well as a direct 24% equity interest in Coral Way City Hotel Corporation, owner of Microtel by Wyndham Mall of Asia. Coral Way, in turn, has a wholly owned subsidiary, Krypton Esplanade Hotel Corporation, which owns the 191-room Trip by Wyndham Mall of Asia. Although these two hotels experienced strong occupancy rates in previous years, the hospitality sector, as we all know, continues to be one of the most impacted by the pandemic. When the Philippine government placed our country under community quarantine starting in March 2020, these two hotels quickly mobilized to serve as quarantine hotels, providing safe accommodations to returning overseas foreign workers and returning overseas Filipinos under the Overseas Workers Welfare Administration, or OWA, the repatriation program. The two hotels also provided accommodations to seafarers from various shipping companies and corporate personnel requiring quarantine and business continuity facilities. Moving forward, Microtel by Wyndham and Trip by Wyndham will continue to be flexible and agile, and will continue to enhance health and safety measures and business processes to build trust and confidence among clients and stakeholders as it prepares for a recovery in the hospitality industry while providing safe shelter to its guests. Finma is on a growth track with exciting prospects for the future. To further accelerate this growth, your company intends to issue bonds of at least 2 billion pesos within the year. The proceeds of these bonds will largely go towards investments in further growing our strategic business units where we have a competitive advantage and where we wish to make a significant social impact. Proceeds will also be used for general corporate purposes. This will be Finma Corporation's first bond issuance in more than 25 years, and will affirm the market's belief in our plans while decreasing our cost of capital through diversifying our funding sources and accessing the capital markets. Onward to 2021, the economic recovery of the Philippines is hinged on how effective economic and health policy measures are implemented in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. A strong nationwide vaccine rollout will be beneficial to spurring consumer confidence and reigniting consumer demand. We are happy to note that this has already begun. And on a personal note, I myself have received my first vaccination dose for seniors through my San Juan LGU, which, by the way, was a very well-run operation. Aside from the vaccine rollout program, government programs such as Bayanihan 3 are designed to jumpstart the labor market and increase consumer spending. Longer term, we expect this consumer spending to be further stimulated through the Create Tax Reform Bill, which lowers corporate income taxes and is intended to encourage more investment spending and to generate more needed employment. These programs will be good for our nation and for our businesses that are strategically positioned to enable the growth of the Philippines. In the face of the pandemic, your company renews its commitment towards incorporating a strategic and business risk mindset into our management framework toward enhancing value and delivering on our objectives. Fundamental to this is our investment in businesses that continue to provide innovative and essential businesses and services so that Filipinos may all live dignified lives. We continue to pursue other areas to enhance our agility, such as succession planning and people development, which further deepen our management bench while incorporating strategic risk, business resiliency, and sustainability programs, which will enhance shareholder value. Before closing, allow me to thank our board of directors for your consistent encouragement and support, particularly throughout this very difficult period. I would also like to express our gratitude to you, our valued shareholders, our officers and employees, our management team, suppliers, partners, creditors, and customers for your continued support and for sharing with us our mission as we continue to make lives better in the Philippines. Thank you all and a pleasant good afternoon.
Thank you, Mr. Del Rosario. May I ask our moderator now to inform the stockholders of the questions received from the stockholders which are relevant to today's meeting?
Mr. Chairman, the following questions were received from the stockholders in advance of this meeting. The first question, which we would like Mr. Ed Sahagun, President and CEO of Finma Construction Material Group, to respond to, says, how does Finma foresee the demand for cement in the coming years? Mr. Ed Sahagun, can you please respond?
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman. The questions about the cement industry. So my outlook is versus last year, we have seen some improvement on the industry. When you look at how the industry actually went from 2019 to 2020, there was an 18% drop. But from 2020 to 2021, we're seeing a growth of around 2 million tons, from 27, 29 million tons. And we see that moving forward, going to increase as it will reach the same level in the next couple of years, up to 34 million ton, which is our 2019 level for the Philippines.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sahagun. Our second question, we would like to request Dr. Chito Salazar to prepare to answer this question. When do you expect face-to-face classes to resume? And what is your outlook for Finma education in the coming school year? Mr. Salazar?
While we continue to, good afternoon to our shareholders and to the board of Finma. While we continue to lobby for face-to-face classes, especially in areas where there is little or almost no incidence of COVID, we actually anticipate that in general, there will be hesitation, especially with the recent surges, to open up classes. And we actually expect that probably for the next year, we will remain in a non-face-to-face situation. However, our education system is ready to transition very quickly from a no face-to-face or to a face-to-face system as the modalities we have developed actually incorporate a distance and remote learning method together with a possible return to face-to-face. So despite this, in terms of our outlook, we remain very optimistic. The program so far, the distance and remote learning programs of Flex and RAD continue to do well and receive good feedback from our students. So we actually expect to grow our enrollment next year. We're actually projecting a growth from about 71 to 72,000 students this year to potentially plus 80,000 in the coming school year. So we still remain very optimistic that despite the challenges, we'll manage to survive and succeed in this crisis. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Salazar. For our FINMA President and CEO, Ramon Rosario Jr., one of our stockholders wants to know, what is FINMA's planned CAPEX for 2021? Mr. De Rosario?
Good afternoon, our stockholders and directors. Our approved budget for investments and capital expenditures for those already approved by our board is 3.2 billion pesos for this year, which includes a significant investment of about 2.2 billion pesos in Song Lam Cement Company in Vietnam, which is our strategic partner and the main supplier of the cement we are selling in the market at the present time. In addition to this investment in Vietnam, which we think is very important strategically for our construction materials business, we are also setting aside approximately 1 billion pesos, which includes investments in our newly acquired schools, such as the Republican College in Quezon City and our school in Laguna, and two of our existing universities where there are infrastructure projects ongoing. In addition, I might add, we continue to be on the lookout for possible acquisitions in the education side, but these have not yet been firmed up nor approved by our board of directors, and therefore they will be disclosed in detail at the time these investments are approved. So we continue to view the future, including this year, with considerable optimism. Thank you.
Those are all the relevant questions received, Mr. Chairman. So it's back to you.
And the corporate secretary then present the resolution proposed for approval by the stockholders and the votes received for the approval thereof.
Mr. Chairman, the resolution for the approval by the stockholders of the annual report, together with the audited financial statements and the notes thereto of the corporation for the year ended December 31, 2020, is now shown on the screen. And based on the tabulation of votes, stockholders owning a total of 214,234,753 shares, or 100% of shares present or represented at this meeting, voted in favor of the said proposed resolution.
Having received the affirmative votes of stockholders owning at least majority of the shares present at this meeting, the resolution is approved. The next item on the agenda is the ratification and approval of all the acts of the board of directors, the committees, and the management since the last annual shareholders meeting. May I request the corporate secretary to present the resolution proposed for approval by the stockholders and the votes received for the approval thereof.
Mr. Chairman, the resolution for the approval and ratification by the stockholders of all acts of the Board of Directors, Executive Committee, and other committees of the Board, officers, and management is shown on the screen. Based on the tabulation of votes, stockholders owning a total of 214,234,753 shares, or 100% of the shares present or represented at this meeting, voted in favor of the proposed resolution, Mr. Chairman.
Having received the affirmative votes of stockholders owning at least a majority of the shares present at this meeting, the resolution is approved. The next item on the agenda is the amendment of the bylaws. May I request the secretary to discuss the resolution for approval by the stockholders The votes received thereon.
Mr. Chairman, the company seeks the approval of our stockholders of the amendment of the corporation's bylaws, moving the quarterly meetings of the board of directors from the third week of the month following the end of each calendar quarter to such dates and at such times and places as the chairman of, or in his absence, the president may determine. The resolution for approval by the stockholders is shown on the screen. And based on the tabulation of votes, stockholders owning a total of 214,234 214,234,753 shares, or 78.7%, or more than 2/3 of the total issued and outstanding capital stock of the company, voted in favor of the said resolution, Mr. Chairman.
Having received the affirmative votes of stockholders owning at least 2/3 of the outstanding capital, the resolution is approved. The next item on the agenda is the election of directors for the ensuing year. May I request the corporate secretary to inform the stockholders of the nominees for election as directors of the corporation and the votes received by the said nominees.
Mr. Chairman, the Nominations and Corporate Governance Committee has pre-screened and shortlisted the nominees qualified to be elected as directors for the ensuing year. There are 11 nominees to fill 11 seats on the board as follows. 1, Mr. Oscar J. Hilado. 2, Mr. Ramon R. Del Rosario Jr. 3, Dr. Magdaleno B. Albarazin Jr. 4, Ambassador Jose L. Cuisha Jr. 5, Mr. Victor J. Del Rosario. 6, Dr. Meliton B. Salazar Jr. 7, Mr. Eduardo A. Sahagun. And as independent directors, 8, Attorney Lilia B. De Lima. 9, Ms. Rizalina G. Mantaring. 10, Mr. Edgar O. Chua. And 11, Mr. Juan B. Santos. Considering that only 11 were nominated to fill 11 seats in the board, and there being no objection to the distribution of the said votes equally among the said nominees, 214,234,753 votes were cast in favor of each nominee, equivalent to 78.7% of the total outstanding shares of the corporation. The said nominees are therefore duly elected as members of the board of directors for the ensuing year and until their successors are duly elected and qualified.
May I congratulate my co-nominees, most of whom are current members of your company's board. Allow me and our Chief Executive Officer, Ramon R. Rosario Jr., to thank our board of directors for your consistent encouragement and support throughout this very difficult period. Allow me in particular to extend a very special word of thanks to Mr. Roberto Lavinia, our Senior Executive Vice President and Chief Operating Officer, who is retiring today after fully 45 years, when he was constantly a pillar of integrity, wisdom, and sobriety. We cannot thank you enough, Bobby, and we wish you well in all that you decide to do from here on. I am pleased that Bobby has agreed to serve as board advisor in PHINMA Corporation and to remain as a director at PHINMA Inc., and has agreed to take my place as chairman of PHINMA Properties. Special thanks also to Mr. Victor J. Del Rosario, who will remain in the PHINMA Corporation board, but will retire from his active management roles in the PHINMA Group, where in recent years he organized and strengthened our strategic planning processes and contributed very meaningfully to the revitalization of PHINMA's presence in the construction materials business. Billy will remain as chairman of PhilCement Corporation and as a member of major PHINMA Group boards. Ramon and I would like to thank Mr. Guillermo Luchanco, who has served on the board of PHINMA Corporation for 9 years and has been an exceptionally valuable advisor to the group with his integrity and his honesty and candor, which were so valuable to the management of the company and our stockholders. Having served the maximum 9 years normally permitted by the Securities and Exchange Commission as independent director, Mr. Lochanco was not available for election to the board this year, but we are pleased that he has agreed to make himself available to serve on the board of Finma Inc., your company's general managers, and we can therefore continue to count on access to his wise counsel. Ramon and I also would welcome our incoming directors, starting with Mr. Edgar Chua, the former country manager of the Shell companies in the Philippines, and the current chairman of the Makati Business Club and the president of De La Salle, Philippines. We also welcome as directors of PHINMA Corporation, Dr. Chito Salazar, who will later on be appointed Executive Vice President for Education and Chief Operating Officer of the PHINMA Group, and Mr. Eduardo Sahagon as Executive Vice President for the Construction Materials Group. Our new directors will surely add to the wisdom and vitality of our board. We now proceed to the next item on our agenda, the appointment of the corporation's external auditors for the ensuing year. The audit committee and the board have selected and recommended the appointment of CICIT Gores Valayo and Company as external auditors for the corporation. May I request the corporate secretary to present the resolution for approval and the votes received by the same.
Mr. Chairman, the resolution for the appointment of CICIT Gores Valayo and Company as external auditors of the company is shown on the screen. Based on the tabulation of votes, stockholders owning a total of 214,234,753 shares, or 100% of shares present or represented at this meeting, voted in favor of the said proposed resolution.
Having received the affirmative votes of stockholders owning at least a majority of the shares present at this meeting, the resolution is approved and SGV is appointed as external auditor of the company for 2021. Congratulations, SGV. Before we adjourn, I would like to inform the stockholders that you may still email your questions or comments within 1 week from today. The company will answer all questions relevant to today's meeting and the matters taken up. There being no further business to discuss, I hereby declare this meeting adjourned. Thank you all for your attendance and participation at this meeting.
Aangat tayong muli. Panghawakan natin ang tiwang ito. Sa ngayon, nagdududa't nangangamba tayo kung makakabalik pa sa dati nating buhay. Pero aangat tayong muli. Hindi pa pagabi sa COVID ang ating tatag at determinasyon. Hindi pa dadaig sa bagyo, lindol, baha, at pagsabog ng bulkan ang ating lahi. Babangon at babangon. Kaya aangat tayong muli. Kakayanin natin ito. Lahat tayo may maiaambag. Sa palagi ang pagsuot ng face mask at face shield, sa paghuhugas ng kamay at pagpapanatili ng distansya, hindi lang sarili natin ang mailigtas, kundi pati na rin ang mga taong nasa ating paligid. Wala mang katiyakan ang mga darating na araw, pero kapag naisapuso natin ang pag-iingat, aangat tayong muli. Isang araw, magkakasama nating sasalubungin ang bagong umaga. Sa ating pag-iingat, aangat tayong lahat.